What is modeling? To approach this topic, we're going to look at it from the perspective of education. Because when you put a teacher in front of a class of students, you get a very natural environment for modeling to take place. So to have a definition to work with, we're going to break the word into three parts, and then expand each of those parts into three full words, getting molding delinquents in groups. So what is the definition of modeling? It's molding delinquents in groups. Let's look at the implications of that. Understand that when you're modeling, you're molding the students into something. Either your likeness directly or an idea that you've created. But even if you've created the idea, you're the creator of the idea, so it's still really you, just indirectly. Once you have that standard that you're going to mold them into, you immediately start looking at your students as delinquents. They don't meet the standard, correct? If they met the standard, they wouldn't need you to mold them. So you create the standard and then you mold the delinquents into that standard. And it's effective to do that in groups, which is why the classroom presents such an ideal situation for modeling. But understand in the end, you as the teacher are going to mold these delinquent students into your likeness either directly or indirectly. So modeling molds unique, free-willed beings into a single likeness. So how is modeling created? Well, very simply, you must start by establishing yourself as the standard. If you're not the standard, there is no point for you to model anybody. So first, if you're going to model, you need to view yourself as the standard to be reached. Then you indirectly, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're going to establish your students as the delinquents. Why? Because they don't meet the standard, which is you. And then you can look down from that lofty place, see the delinquent nature of everyone around you, and begin to mold them into your likeness. And finally, you must then establish motivations as the standard. The irony is, your students know you're not the standard, as do you. So what do you have to do? You have to create manipulative motivations. You give them gold stars, you give them praise, or you give them promises of what graduation will bring in order to motivate them to conform to your likeness. And that's just what we must do in the fallen world. We don't have the standard, and the students don't know God when they're born, so they don't have anything to measure you against. So if you sit there and present yourself with the standard, what are they going to do? Okay, they'll go along with it, and maybe if you give them the right motivations, gold stars, praise, graduation, they'll go along with you, but underneath all that, everybody knows the truth. So modeling motivates while constantly measuring failure. And if you've noticed in classrooms, even when the students get an A, they don't feel like they've really succeeded. They can present themselves like they really succeeded, but if you get beneath that, you realize that all students know they haven't met the standard. Because they can't be the teacher, how do you be somebody else? You cannot be someone else. So you can never meet this modeling standard. So in the fallen world, we motivate all these students to action, but we're always constantly measuring their failure, despite our best intentions. So why then create modeling? It seems fairly negative, right? And it's causing a lot of distress, and the students never believe they're really successful. So why not just throw it out altogether? Well, we don't want to do that. First, when you model as a fallen human being, you expose yourself as the one who's not the standard. And that's very helpful. The more people we can eliminate as the standard, the better. Because there's supposed to be only one standard. So the more people we have presenting themselves as the standard, it becomes very obvious that they're not the standard. And it exposes the human nature of not being the standard. If you've noticed, all human beings grow. Well, normally to about 20 we grow, our body grows, but we're always growing. Our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions are always developing, always expanding. But if you're growing, you can't be the standard. You're growing into the standard. So the point of human beings is not to be the standard, it's to be growing into the standard, which none of us are. So we see then the ultimate purpose of our modeling is to expose the one who is the unchanging standard, God Himself. So all human modeling exposes God, who is the model. It all points to Him, because we keep changing, right? We change the rules, we change the way we do things, but that's not a standard. Only God's the standard. So who creates modeling then? Well, very simply, one believing they're God. You wouldn't model, present yourself as the standard unless you believed you are the standard, but only God's the standard. So everyone who's modeling, which is all of us in the fallen nature, we all believe we're God, and that comes from the Garden of Eden. Why did we eat the forbidden fruit? To be like God. And that's why modeling has such appeal to us as fallen souls. We also are displaying ourselves as God. We don't just believe we're God and just like hold that inside of ourselves, which many of us do in many ways. However, we want to present ourselves as God. We put our standard out there. We display ourselves as the standard. And we're expecting recognition that we are God. We're expecting the students to, in certain ways, worship our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, our ideals, our concepts, our creations. We're expecting some kind of recognition through our modeling that we are God. Now, as we look at this list, it's ridiculous to think that any human being would actually model, because clearly we're not God. Why would we try to display ourselves as God? Why would we expect recognition of being God when we're not? However, there's another conclusion here. There is one person who has the right for all three of these things. God believes he's God. God displays that he's God. And God expects recognition that he's God. So our ultimate conclusion about modeling is that it's good. Modeling is good as long as you're God.